Hey, Nisbo here. So this is my NVMe SSD comparison, PCIe 4 or PCIe 4 versions of these SSDs. I have the 980 Pro from Samsung, the Western Digital Black, two different versions, and one is with the heatsink and one is without. This is me doing this with the ASUS ROG Strix Z590i. It's an ITX board. And one of the things I wanted to try was to see, I guess, three different things, which SSD worked best, and then which one would I want to kind of move forward with. So the things that I did was I tried the Samsung SSD, but I used the motherboard heatsink, and then I removed the motherboard heatsink, and then there was a thermal pad underneath that I removed as well, and then I tried it, the SSD naked. I did the Western Digital SSD, and I used the motherboard heatsink, and then I removed all of the heatsink and everything else, and then tried the Western Digital drive naked. I also tried the heatsink version, which is this one. So I, um, I did everything naked without the heatsink. Obviously, it won't fit. And then I just had the Western Digital SSD, or sorry, the Western Digital heatsink. And then I, at the end, decided to just move forward with the Samsung SSD because it seemed to run cooler. And then I went with the motherboard heatsink with FujiPoly to see if I guess the performance, to see how that would work out. So these are my results. So this motherboard heatsink with the FujiPoly, using the CrystalDiskMark and then Samsung Magician, was able to provide the best temperatures, and performance was relatively the same. I think that the performance will vary kind of up and down, and really isn't that far from what is expected. Sequential read on these drives is supposed to be around 7,000. They're around 6,900, or yeah, 6,900 or 6,800, which for the drive, it's pretty normal. Sequential writes, again, depending on the type of test. If I'm using Samsung Magician versus CrystalDiskMark, I saw some discrepancies, but at least I saw the consistencies between the black SN850 drive versus the Samsung 980 Pro. And you can kind of see how there's kind of the when I went with the motherboard heatsink, the temperatures did seem to be a bit more stable, and stay between or even below kind of the 60 and 64 range, degree range. But when the interesting thing is that when the drives are naked, without any heatsink, the temperatures would actually rise quite a bit and pretty significantly, where even after I ran CrystalDiskMark, it warmed up the drive, and then I ran Samsung Magician, and it raised the temperatures quite a bit. The Western Digital Black naked runs really hot. It seems like it'll get up to like 84 degrees. And this is just using CrystalDiskMark. It wasn't even running the test multiple times. I was just doing the sequential read and sequential write test. And the interesting thing is that naked versus just the drive with a heatsink, with like a factory heatsink, it was bringing down the temperatures about 10 degrees Celsius. So that's the interesting thing, is that this heatsink, the factory applied Western Digital drive heatsink, this one right here, would actually bring down temperatures by 10 degrees. But maybe one of these times I'll try using the Western Digital and then using the motherboard heatsink and give this a try. But I'm guessing it'll be probably very similar, where you can kind of see here's the CrystalDiskMark with the heatsink, the factory motherboard heatsink, and there's like a 20-degree difference. And even going with Magician, you can see that it goes from like 64 to 47 degrees. So for me, this was the winner. And since the 980 Pro that I had was 2 terabytes, I said, well, let me go with that for now, since I was going to use this machine for more of a programming, coding type of a box, where I was going to maybe do a dual boot, or maybe do something where I'm doing Linux. Either which way, definitely, I guess the things that matter, my conclusions is that heat sinks, they do seem to matter. They will bring the temperature down. The other thing that I noted was that thermal pads, they do matter. Interestingly, when you can see this in the video, when you have the motherboard heatsink, there is a thermal pad that's underneath the SSD, and that does not seem to be touching. So it's kind of the thermal pad is a little too thin. So increasing it and adding the FujiPoly, I was able to really fill that gap. I used I think it was around 3 millimeter, and then underneath the SSD, and then the one that's on the top was about 1 millimeter. So I used thermal or FujiPoly's I think it was GA or G45A. I think that was the type of thermal pad. And then the motherboard heat sinks is much more effective. And I think it's only because of the fact that this thing is really large, right? The other side of this too is the bottom side of the SSD. It doesn't have anything to kind of conduct downwards. So the way this motherboard was built, there's actually 3 layers, and there is a middle layer and a metal plate underneath here that you can see it in the videos that normally has a thermal pad, but that thermal pad was not even touching the bottom of the SSD. So when the SSD could actually conduct heat downwards as well as upwards and into this bigger plate, my feeling is that the larger heatsink is more effective. The other thing is good air circulation. Obviously, if this is just soaking up heat, it will definitely draw away some level of temperatures or heat and move it away from the SSD. But if you have just passive cooling, this is not really going to do too much other than at some point you're going to reach a certain temperature and kind of hold steady. With an SSD, it kind of goes up and down. So you will see things where the temperature will cool down and then raise up when you're in peak use, and then it'll kind of, or heavy use, and then it'll drop back down. The interesting thing about this is that if you just have air blowing on this, it will actually turn this kind of heat sink or this even the fins here, it will start to pull, I guess, have colder air on the top or the surface area, or the top surface area, and then the heat will rise up into this, and it will dissipate the heat faster. So the passive versus active cooling, what it really does is it makes it so that way the cooling effect is faster. It doesn't do anything unless it's really cold air to really chill the SSD. If anything, it's going to just make it so that way you can reach a certain temperature faster and cool down the SSD faster. So I think that's kind of where I'm at. It was pretty impressive where at least I can run the test and then be able to kind of stay, if you can see here, 47 degrees compared to like when it's just naked without the heatsink. 78 degrees, or even in Western Digital, I'm sure that this 84 degrees can be dropped pretty significantly, and if anything, it might be that same type of 20-degree or even more drop. So those are my conclusions. Those are my results. Thanks. Peace out.
Hey, so this is the internal of my case, and it has the right here is this plate. This is the ASUS ROG Strix Z590i, the ITX motherboard. You can see this heatsink is right here, and it's on top of the SSD. I have a feeling that this is actually absorbing a lot of heat. The other thing to kind of make note here is it's touching these heat pipes right here from the CPU, and I believe that it may be causing maybe some sort of heat to be either moving through these pipes and then touching this and then warming up the plate, or vice versa. It might be touching this and then might be dissipating some of the heat. But overall, I think that the SSD might be running a little bit warmer than normal because of the fact that there's no active air being blown on this. Normally, this kind of a thing makes sense if you have some sort of a fan blowing right on the top of this, and this then would be very effective, very useful. But in a case like this, where it's small and everything is enclosed, the air movement would not be enough. So there would be this maybe buffer of hot, warm air that would just kind of build up over this, and overall, then the SSD wouldn't get as cool. So you get the temperature coming from the SSD moving its way up through the metal here, and then the metal would heat the air that's all around up here, and at some point it would act as an insulator, kind of blocking from any sort of cooling if there is nothing to kind of take this air that's above this heatsink and move it away. So what I'm going to do is remove this, run my benchmarks again, and see if I end up getting some better performance or if it's about the same. But overall, I think I'm going to remove this because of other reasons, and I'll explain that in a little bit. Alright, so this is the 980 Pro sitting inside of the motherboard. You can see that I ended up taking this piece off. This has some connections here that are used to kind of connect and kind of provide the kind of these LEDs to light up, some power, and be able to control that. The heatsink also has this thermal pad here, and I believe it kind of helps to soak up the heat and kind of transfer it into this metal piece. Now, the one thing that you hear rumors about a lot of times is this right here is where the controller is. This is actually the piece that gets really warm. The NAND itself, this is where the storage is, these two black chips over here under the sticker. These operate within a certain temperature. They have to operate hot and cold in a certain way, so that way they can, within that range, be able to kind of flip the bits and then be able to kind of store your data and be able to kind of more permanently store your data. Now, the controller is the thing that gets really hot because a lot of data is coming in and the power is coming in through this to kind of run the electricity into there. The controller, I guess the things that people talk about is how if the controller gets warm, if there is a pad or maybe a heatsink that goes and transfers that heat all the way over to these NAND chips, it could actually prematurely wear these things down. And it depends on how hot this SSD can get overall. So if you're operating within a temperature of 40 to 80 or 85 degrees, obviously if you're going consistently over that 80 or 85, the controller heat is kind of transferring over to these NAND, and I believe the NAND at some point they start to degrade because of the fact that you're trying to make them run in a temperature that's warmer than they can operate. So the thought is if you don't have air moving through here, this can get really, really warm. So the thought is to just leave it all kind of naked, and the heat will just transfer out from I guess just the air here, and then naturally you would end up getting more air. If you have another piece of metal up here, it would soak up the heat, and then it would just transfer that heat right over to these chips over here, which is not a great thing. So what I'm going to do is remove that heatsink and then give things. So one more thing is underneath the SSD is this thermal pad, and I'm going to remove that as well. Thinking is that thermal pad is going to transfer the heat from that controller going all the way over and to the bottom of the PCB. Now the PCB itself can act as kind of a conduit for temperature and heat. So the idea is to try to make this totally naked, have it kind of levitate over this, and let the ambient air kind of go around here and just either lift out of the case, or we can probably blow in some cool air and it'll be more effective at cooling the SSD.
Hey, Nispo here. So what I wanted to do is a benchmark on my 980 Pro, Samsung 980 Pro NVMe. So I installed a brand new operating system, and I am going to install, I guess, the Samsung software first. Here, finish. Samsung 980 Pro, Samsung Magician. Let me download this. And then the drive is this 2 TB. This is the specific drive. It is an M.2 drive, form factor PCIe 4.0. Advertised sequential read speed is 7,000 megabytes. Sequential write speed 5,100 megabytes per second. Let's see here. It is 2 times faster than the Gen 3. Gen 3 usually is around 3,000 megabytes per second. So 7,000 is a little bit, it's definitely much faster. Sometimes I'll see these PCIe Gen 3s go about 3,200 megabytes per second. Let's see here. I think that's about it. Let's see, I have my download. Let me install this. It's a zip file, so extract all. Run the installer. I've done nothing to this operating system other than do the patches and any sort of updates. You can see here that it's all been updated. Okay, so here's the out-of-the-box software. The other software that I use is CrystalDiskMark, and this is the link, CrystalDo World. Quick downloads. You can download the newest version of CrystalDiskInfo. This gives you informational stuff around your SSD, and then DiskMark is the actual performance benchmark. Do that. Now, sometimes you'll get this type of ad that pops up. Don't click it. Just X out and wait. And then the download will start. I'll just go back, go to DiskInfo, download this one as well. Should see it kind of kick off and download. Let me go into the folder. This is the download folder. Now that I've downloaded it, I'll close all that. I'll start with DiskInfo, install this software. Okay, finish, it'll start it up. Then I will install DiskMark. Set, next, install, finish, and it will start up the software. So this If you hit F5 while selecting this window, it will kind of update the temperature. Right now it's pretty steady at 51 degrees. Let's see here. So let me run the CrystalDiskMark. This is kind of a third party. I can run the Samsung performance benchmark, and I'll do that afterwards. Let me go ahead and what I normally do is this runs 5 passes of the same test of writing and reading this 1 gigabyte file that it generates, and it does this to the C drive, which is the main SSD drive. This normally I end up just doing this test right here. This is the one that everyone kind of refers to when they look at the sequential large file reads and writes. So I'll just kick that off. And then I will go over here and just occasionally hit F5, and you can kind of see that the temperature starts to increase. We're up to 59 degrees. Short pause, and it's going to start preparing for a write. You can see here that it starts to go through 2 of 5, and it'll change to 3 of 5. And then I just update the temperature, just hit F5. Now you can see that during the write, it's a bit more strenuous, and the temperature will jump up quite a bit. Okay, the test is finished, and we kind of peaked out at 60 degrees or so. So this is about expected. You're never going to get quite that 7,000. I guess I won't say never, but it's really hard to do that. And then same for the writes. This will kind of ebb and flow and go up and down. Maybe you might see a discrepancy around 50 megabytes per second or so. And then you might actually see this hit 50, 100. And this sometimes might hit 7,000. For the software here, let's see here, we can do the performance benchmark. This is Samsung Magician. We'll just hit start, and this benchmark will run. Occasionally, we'll just check on the temperature here as well, and you can see that it starts to jump up. Went up to 57, 58, 59. Yeah, you can see right away that the Samsung's software for benchmarking it definitely clocks up higher, where it's 6,922, and temperature is jumping up quite a bit. Maybe the Samsung test is a little bit more rigorous. Looks like the temperature is holding at about 64 degrees. Yeah, its temperature is dropping. You can see that the sequential write here is at 5,159. And it's performing the random reads and writes, or the random write. You can see that it's not as strenuous. It seems like the sequential reading and more specifically the sequential writing is what causes a lot of temperatures to rise. And you can see that the temperature is dropping again. Just occasionally hitting F5. It looks like we've probably didn't get really too hot here. The operating temperature for the Samsung SSD is between, I think it's 40 degrees Celsius to about 85 degrees Celsius. So we were never really up into that 80 range. All right, going to pull this apart and then try the other SSD and then give things a try.
All right, so this is the Western Digital Black SN850. It's a 1 terabyte version. Okay.
Hey, so this is the SSD and stopped all or got removed all the heat sinks and everything else from it. I'm going to start up Magician and start up DiskInfo as well as CrystalDisk. See, we can kind of see that the temperature is quite a bit lower, but I haven't run any sort of load through it. So let's just run a little bit of a load and kind of increase the heat and see how high it does get. Looks like the temperature, the highest I got to was about 68. Let's go ahead and run this performance test. can see that the test got up to 6939 megabytes per second sequential read, sequential write. This is now getting closer to that advertised speed of 5100 megabytes per second. But you can kind of see that the temperature spiked and it went pretty close to 80 or so. It was getting to right under probably like 78 or so. And then you can see that it's starting to cool off now, or at least the SSD is starting to cool. And it's starting to drop back down to the 50s range. All right, so this is the Western Digital hard drive. Just installed the operating system, nothing else. Gonna do the same process. Going to first start with the Western Black SN850. So this is the hard drive that is in the system without heatsink, 1 terabyte. So this is the exact drive. Same type of specs, PCIe Gen 4, M.2. This one has 700 megabytes per second read, sequential read, and then 5,300 megabytes sequential write. So in a lot of online benchmarks, or I guess people doing benchmarks, they say that this drive is actually a faster drive than the Samsung 980 Pro. And that's because the 980 Pro, they changed the tech out underneath or within the drive, so it doesn't quite perform like it has in the past. But it is still a fast drive. You saw what the drive, how fast it worked. The software is different, obviously. So this is using Western Digital's dashboard software. We're going to download that. And we're going to install this. Okay, and we can see that it's running. Has a temperature. I don't believe it has any sort of tools for benchmarking. I think these are more around diagnostic software. With this drive, updated the firmware. Same thing with the Samsung drive to the newest specs. I don't believe there is any sort. So we'll just kind of leave this running in the background. Do a CrystalDiskMark. Download this. Again, we'll start with info. Click out of that. Then wait. Go backwards. CrystalDiskMark. Okay. Go into the downloads folder, install DiskInfo. Accept, next, install, finish. Let's see here. We'll install DiskMark. Finish and close out of all this. Okay, so let's see, we have similar setup. Let's see, temperatures holding steady at around 51, 52. Let's go ahead and run the CrystalDiskMark. I'll kind of update the temperature as I go along. Looks like the reads peaked out at 63 degrees. It's performing the writes right now, 105. Temperature is jumping to about 63 degrees. '64. Okay, it looks like the test is finished, and now it's starting to cool down. And you can see here that the read is at 6,816. Sequential write is at 5,228. It's kind of close to the advertised speeds. And again, the temperature has not gone anywhere near that 80 degrees range that some of these SSDs are rated for. Usually operating temperature around 40 to 80 degrees, 85 degrees is about normal. If you start getting into that range where it's too hot, then it causes some problems and even throttling.
Alright, so this is the Western Digital Black. It's the same SN850, but this one has the built-in heatsink. I want to give this a try to take a look and see how this works out.
Alright, so we're back to the Western Digital drive. Again, it is naked without a heatsink. See if I can find the software. There it is, dashboard. There's the drive. Start up DiskInfo, DiskMark. See here. So it's temperature seems to start out pretty low, lower than normal. Gonna run the test here. Keep updating the temperature. So it's doing the sequential reads. Temperature is going above 67, 68, 69, 70. Wow, it's jumping up quite a bit. 75 degrees. 78. Sequential write. It's going way into the 80s. 81. 82. 83, 84. Health status turned bad. That's no good. But the benchmark is roughly around the same performance-wise. And I don't think this ever went above 73 degrees, which is odd. So it's either this CrystalDiskInfo reports something a little bit warmer than what it really got to, or that is accurate and the drives are getting really hot. But what's clear is that with the heatsink, the drives were staying much lower in temperature, and I think it's because there's a place to output that heat and then have the heatsink soak up some of that heat and pull it away from the controller. I actually have one of these Western Digitals with a heatsink. I think what I'm going to do is give this one a try and do the same measurement and see what happens. Okay, so this is the fresh install, and for the Western Digital SN850 with the heatsink. See if I can download all the software. Let me show you the drive. Let's see, with the heatsink, 1 terabyte. This is what the drive looks like. This is what I installed. It has all the exact same specs as the other one, but it has the heatsink on top of it with this kind of LED scheme on it. It's pretty neat. Let me go ahead and install the software, Western Digital dashboard, and set that up. And then let me go ahead and also install CrystalDiskMark. Download the disk info. Should download on its own. Then DiskMark. Right, and I will install these. Close that. Oops. Here. Oh, looks like I already installed it. All right. Let me install disk info. Finish and DiskMark. Okay. Yeah, you can see here the drive says that it's the NVMe with the heatsink. Temperature is right around 56, 57. Going to run the big file sequential read and write. Update the temperature. Wow, that jumps right up to 63. It's going into the sequential right. And the temperature is jumping up to 71 degrees. And it's peaking out at about 73 degrees. As far as the performance, it's still around the same. You can see that the writes is higher than the Samsung drive, but it's the drive is performing pretty much just like the other drive without the heatsink. The only difference is the temperature. You definitely see that it was not jumping up as high and going into the 80s or even tripping the health status. Wait for this to cool down a little bit. So it seems that the heatsink that is provided by ASUS is pretty good. It just may be because of the fact that it is such a larger piece of metal and it's soaking up so much more heat. But it does get pretty hot. So the sense would be for a heatsink, naturally if you put some sort of air on it, it turns it from being a passive heatsink into something that's a little bit more active. Suggestion would probably be to use the heatsink, but make sure that there's plenty of airflow, so that way any sort of ambient heat kind of or air that's around the heatsink gets pushed out, and it allows for the heat to kind of dissipate.
So one thing I noticed is that this back plate here, this is all metal right here. Some sort of, probably some sort of a steel, maybe aluminum. I doubt it's aluminum though. And then this pad that was on there, the thermal pad that was on there before, if you can see this, I will put this in, and interesting part about this is, probably can't see this, but you can kind of see that as I push this down, the pad is not really touching. So they gave you a thermal pad, but it does not touch the plate on the back to be able to kind of dissipate any sort of heat. So this is actually kind of useless. So what I think I'm going to try is to fashion out a different thermal pad and put it out there, and maybe even replace this one here that comes with the heatsink that's on the top, and then see if I can make something that's a little bit more effective. A little quick upgrade, and then we can see what happens. Okay, so this is the Samsung 980 Pro. You can see the thermal pads that I threw in there. The bottom pad underneath the SSD is this one right there, and that one is I had a 2.5 and a 0.5, so that filled the gap, and it's about 3 millimeters. And then the top one I had 2.5 millimeters, so this is a 1 millimeter thickness of thermal pads, and I just stack them to kind of bridge the gap. There was a little pressure on the bottom one, but these pads are supposed to compress, so that was fine. And then this one, same thing, I had to actually push it down and compress the pad. There is a level of compression that these pads need. I think this is the FujiPoly GR45A, I believe. I'll give the exact number and I'll post it.
Alright, so this is the Samsung SSD, and I put some custom FujiPoly thermal pads in between where I guess the ASUS supplied thermal pads are. I'll just see if this performs any better. And we can already see that it seems to be taking definitely some sort of a operating temperature right off the bat is 32 degrees. Now, I was told that this drive needs to operate between 40 and 85, or roughly 40 degrees. So, see, it's still running around 33. It's really, really cool. Let me run the test and see how temperature rises. "38 degrees. It's going to perform the sequential write. 39 degrees. "41 degrees. Let me run Samsung's benchmark. "47. Looks like nothing ever peaked past 50. Yeah, performance is about the same. It's around 6913 here and 5139 here. Temperatures remain really cool, which is pretty shocking. I think I'm going to stick with using the heatsink and see how this goes over time.